Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Peas in a Pod, episode 226.
We made it.
Yes, we did. Ed, how's the chair?
It's okay.
We've been sitting in these chairs we film a lot of these in a row.
I think you and I switched chairs.
A few weeks ago, we were filming, and Ed was talking about his chair.
Well, that video never got shown.
That's part of our lost.
That's why I wanted to check in.
I like this chair better than the one I had on the corrupted episodes. I was in that chair last
So you didn't
time.
like this one?
That chair, I don't.
So Nathan, how is the Ed unapproved chair?
I'll also say I unapprove it. I don't know. It doesn't bother me, but I don't want to.
It looks comfy.
It does look comfy. It is not.
It doesn't bother me, but some days I'm a contrarian, and some days I just want everyone to get along. So
is today one of those days?
I know I'm get along. I also
along
disapprove.
today.
I will that which you approve, I shall approve, and that which you disapprove, I shall disapprove.
Okay. Wow.
Very, very. What's
Agreeable.
Is that? Yeah,
That's
there you go. That's a good
agreeable.
word.
Well, I hope you're agreeable to this question.
All right.
Does amenable also mean agreeable?
I think so.
Like amenable doesn't
Is
mean
that what
like
it
we
means?
can agree to terms. We can come to terms.
I think so.
I don't have my phone. I'm gonna look it up. You read the question. I'm gonna look it up.
That's the general sense I have, but I don't know if that's.
I'm gonna look
If
it
I
up.
were using that in a paper I was writing, that's how I would use it.
That's
But
probably
that
the
could
only
be
place
right.
I'd ever use it is
That's
in a
right.
paper I'm
I
writing.
never use it in conversation.
No, I have
But that's
not.
a great word. Thanks
Let
for
me
bringing
read
that up.
Amenable means open and responsive to suggestion. So it's similar, but not exactly the same.
Okay.
I'm easily persuaded or controlled.
I bet that has never been applied to me.
No, I would not think so. Even about
Ed is
this
not
says
amenable.
Ed Martin, even on things he agrees with, not responsive to that suggestion. I agree with what you said. Let's argue about it.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was looking at this question. I don't know what my answers are going to be on this one. So I hope y'all have some ideas.
We'll be surprised together.
I'll be surprised at what I come up with.
Here we go.
Question.
My surprise face.
You ready? Oh. That's it. Just the eyebrows just went up. That's it. That's all Ed's got. Question. Do you think there are levels of privilege in heaven? I've heard some people say...
Heard some people cough loudly into the microphone, directly.
I
into
tried to cover the microphone, which meant I coughed loudly toward you.
right in my ear.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to start over.
Okay.
Do you think there are levels of privilege in heaven? I've heard some say that your riches, your home, etc., will vary depending on your faithfulness and how you handled your earthly blessings. As long as I get there, I know it doesn't matter, but I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I know the point of life is not just to get to heaven. I'm just curious.
So I would want to say up front, everything that we or anyone else says about heaven is a wild guess.
Yeah.
Speculation.
It's speculation.
For the most part.
There is not a whole lot said
Yeah.
about what's going to...
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear where you came up with riches and a home.
I can see where those are. You can get to those places.
But not. Okay.
I think.
Does it mean we're going to have a house that we live in?
Oh, I don't know.
That's what I'm wondering.
I
don't think that's it.
I think maybe
or
we're going
mansions. Like I grew up singing songs in church about having a mansion on a hilltop.
Yeah.
You know that old song? Or some people like I don't want a shack in heaven. I don't care. I'll take the shack. I don't need a mansion.
No.
Like, really? Are there going to be shacks in heaven?
That sounds not like it would be.
It just
Shack typically means to me slumlord.
I would think.
And
Yeah.
I don't think God's a slumlord.
So all those images, I have trouble with them sometimes. Not that they're wrong necessarily.
I
think we all naturally want to say there are not levels of privilege in heaven.
I don't want to naturally say that.
What do we mean? You don't want to naturally say what?
I think there are. I think there are rewards.
No, hang on. Let me say this. I
clarify.
think the natural tendency of the human heart is to say levels of privilege is unfair. Levels of privilege is unfair. It's certainly a very American ideal to think that.
Well, I just want to say to you, I don't think that's the American ideal.
Well, hang on.
This would be the amenable part.
The American ideal is 100% that levels of privilege is unfair because that's the ideal. The reality of America
to which we will defend to the death that I have a right to have more than you because I worked harder than you.
I agree.
And I should, and the reason you don't have what I have is because you're lazy.
Mhm.
Yes, because they would say, and that's the argument they would make is, I'm not privileged, I worked harder for you. They would say privilege is unfair, which is why I'm not privileged, because that would mean what I have is somehow unfair. But I think to the point you just said, and I think it's an easy point, isn't it also a level to which to say everything we do in this life doesn't matter as long as we get through the doors of the pleasure factory, then everyone's getting the same thing.
Yeah.
So which one of those is fair?
I do like calling that meme. That's what I tend to think of, that idea of it's a caricature of heaven, the pleasure factory.
Right.
I think if we just start forcing people to say, I don't want to go to heaven, I want to go to the pleasure factory.
Yes, wherever that
it
is.
might stop some of that.
That's how my kids are. Apparently there's some place in downtown Newton called the Chocolate Factory now. It's down where that...
It's a candy store, yeah.
It's a candy. There were lines wrapped around the building on Saturday. I said, what is that? It's a whole long story. But one of my daughters, who loves the words unfair and fair, had convinced herself somehow that when my wife she apparently had heard of the Chocolate Factory and said nothing about it, this daughter said, I thought you were taking us there. And she said, I never said that. And she goes, well, I thought it in my brain. Oh. And I said, well, you thinking stuff in your brain does not contractually obligate anybody to anyone.
That is a great setup for what I think a lot of people think. I think that gets people in trouble with God all the time. I had a conversation today with somebody who was quoting something to me, and I said, do you have a Bible? We were on the phone. I said, do you have a Bible available? They said they do. And I said, what version do you like to read from? Because I was going to open my handy dandy computer Bible.
Yeah.
And they told me which one. I said, let's read that out loud.
Yeah.
And they started reading. I said, now, is what you said what that says? They said, no, but it means such. I said, you didn't write it, so you don't get to say what it means.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yes. The way my daughters used to say it when they were little was, I thinked it in my brain. So I like to say that all the time is, I didn't hear you say it, but I did think it in my brain.
Yeah.
And so to get to the point, I think that's where a lot of people end up with this thing in heaven is either what it's going to be is it's a pleasure factory. As long as you get in, it's kind of like Jason just went on a cruise. Mm-hmm. Jason just went on a cruise ship.
I did.
And certainly there are like levels of privilege on the cruise ship because there are people who they're a little closer to the Lido deck and the buffet because that's where their room is.
And then you can pay for extra stuff.
That's right.
Sure, you pay for it. And there's levels of privilege, but everyone getting on the boat's getting food. And as long as I get on the boat, as long as I get on the good cruise ship heaven,
that's right, my
life's going to be fine. Then there's other people, I would say, that sit on the other side and say, no, everything you do is giving you another jewel in the crown, another mansion on the hill, and I think both of those are really missing the point of things that Jesus said, like when he said to his disciples, those of you who've left homes and families, how much more will you have in the kingdom of heaven? I don't think what Jesus is saying, all right, you left homes, so I'm going to give you a bigger home in heaven. You didn't leave home, but you did leave family, so you get better family. You got duds of a kid, I'm going to get you better kids in heaven. Like, I think I said it, and everyone thinks, okay, clearly he's being sarcastic. But that is, I don't know how else to take what people think he's saying there other than what I think he's actually saying.
But there are other verses where he says things like, he says, those who are responsible with little will be granted much. And he talks about being over certain cities.
Yep.
I don't know what he means.
But then he told a story about people that worked a long time, people that worked a little time, and they all got the same reward.
I get it.
So
now we got to decide.
He's not saying what we think he's saying. Is my point.
Yeah, and or he is saying what we think he's saying. It just means a lot of different things.
That's right.
Well, and I think
he may have been making one point, and he used the word, and it appears to us everybody gets the same reward. So everybody does this, they're going to get into heaven. But some people may get to be over a city, and you're not going to be over a city.
That's right. Yeah. It's as Ed's already said, it's impossible to at this point for us to fully know what it's going to be. I think principles that we can pull out of it is Jesus does certainly make clear that the way we have learned how to live interactive life with God in this life will affect our ability to have interactive life with God in heaven. In eternity is probably a better way to say it. In eternity, in the afterlife. Even if that's at a very base level of when people say, well, why would a loving God send people to hell? That's not what God's doing. God's saying, if in this life you did not want interactive life with me, you don't have, I'm not going to force interactive life with you forever. You can have what you wanted for eternity. So in the same way, people who wanted interactive life with God in this life will experience that forever.
Well, and I'll say this because about what you just said, I think that gets us on a trail that I don't have all the answers for, okay, because it's sketchy. But there is nothing that says that once we are living we're living life after death.
Uh-huh.
Whatever happens after Jesus comes back,
Uh-huh.
and whatever that
new heavens and new earth.
Yeah, whatever that happens is, I personally can see hints in the scripture that growth continues to take place.
Sure.
So I do believe that the life I build in this life will impact where I am in eternity with God and all those kind of things. What that means, I don't know. I had a professor, and I know I've said this before on here, they used to say, Jesus promises everybody will have their cup full and overflowing. But all of us are building different size cups.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will only have built a life that's a teacup.
Yeah.
And it will be full and overflowing. And, the Apostle Paul built a tanker ship.
Yeah.
Sure. And his will be fully overflowing. And nobody will look at that and think, I didn't get enough. I got everything I could hold. But in eternity, I believe we will continue to learn and develop. And
I would think so.
That kind of thing, because that's the nature of humanity before the fall.
Well, I was going to say,
before the fall, we were people who were learning, and God was cooperating and co-ruling with us. I believe we will be in that place again.
And I think that's the important part of the picture we get in Revelation. So much of it, we don't have time to go into this. So much of the language of what the new creation, certainly New Jerusalem and stuff, it's all language of the Garden of Eden being placed within Jerusalem, which would have been their version of this kind of place where God meets with people, right? So it's people, it's this garden city, as many people talk about it, this place, because there's a river running right through the middle of the city, and there's gardens, and a lot of the language they use of the precious metals is all the language from the Garden of Eden. The reason I bring that up is to say many of our misconceptions of even the Garden of Eden affect our misconceptions. Many people think God made the world perfect when he made it, in the sense that God wanted it just to stay that way, be a garden forever, because in our mind, perfect, and in the Hebrew imagination, even the word perfect is complete. This is the way God wanted it always to be. What the image we're given in the beginning is the Garden of Eden is what most of us would think. It's a little bit, it is a garden. It's a starting place for human beings to work with God and cultivate the land. They were just supposed to do it with God. What God says about the creation when he creates it is it's good. Is that he goes, this is good. There is nothing in this that you would look at and say, oh, there's evil. There's brokenness. There's this. So the return in heaven is not somehow God goes, and now everything's done. And so now we're just sitting here. Everyone can just sit down for the next eternity.
Yeah.
You can just sit here. There's this idea of we're in a city with other people, but it's the Garden of Eden. And maybe things are continuing. God's continuing the cultivation project. It's just in a new creation where there's no sorrow. There's no suffering anymore.
There's no sin. There's no need for gates on the city because there's no one to attack it.
That's right.
All of those things are gone. And that's what I mean by Eden. It's hard for us to imagine how wonderful that will be. But some of us will have greater potential. And just because the New Jerusalem is the center of that does not mean it's the only city where people will go.
Sure. Yeah. So it's impossible to know what it means. I think privilege in the sense that the way most of us read privilege, and I think certainly is a way that would be more beneficial for those of us living right now in a fallen world to read it as privilege is some people are advantaged while other people are disadvantaged. I think that idea in heaven does not exist. Of there are going to be some people, well, you're disadvantaged, so your life is just beneath everyone else.
That's of sin.
Right. The idea that in order for me to have in order for me to use the language Jesus used, to rule a city, that must mean that I'm the one with advantage and everyone else is beneath me. That concept of leadership is of sin, is a part of the fall, so that
Yes.
won't exist. So I think you have to throw that concept of privilege out, that the person who's in charge is somehow greater advantage than the person who's not. It really is. Well, I have to, once again, everything, because it's just the stage of life I'm in with parenting, goes back to, I have to explain this to my younger daughters all the time. There are things that my older daughter is allowed to do because I trust her to do them, and she's the older, but I have to explain to them all the time. But she has burdens placed on her in being the firstborn and being the one who has to lead. I said, in that, when I leave and she's in charge of y'all, if y'all misbehave and she allows it, I'm coming to her, not to you. I'm coming to say, why'd you allow them to go into that place they weren't supposed to? Why were you doing this? Leadership comes with responsibilities.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it until you were talking about it. Well, I hadn't put those two. I certainly think about it. You said when we think privilege, we do think somebody must be disadvantaged to get that privilege.
Right. Which I want to go back to is most often true in our current world. Yes.
Because of the sin.
Because of the sin.
All of us.
Yes.
The only way I can gain my privilege is to disadvantage you.
Yes.
Right.
Which almost always is true.
Yes.
It's just the way it has worked out in this world. But when God talks about privileging, I had this conversation again with somebody that I really care about who's trying to figure things out. We think of God choosing the chosen people. And the way even in our world, it still gets talked about the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. We think privileged, more blessed. And they're blessed because God chose them. But it really meant responsible.
Yes.
They were responsible for the mission of God in the world, at which they failed.
Yes.
They not only failed, they didn't want to do it.
No, this
they
was not
openly
interesting to them.
made ways to not do it.
Yes.
And so Jesus came and fulfilled all of that. The church now has been privileged to carry out that same thing. We are his chosen people, his royal priesthood. We are a holy nation.
Yes.
That's very clear. But God, it does not mean we are privileged above people, and so we look down. We are responsible to and responsible for.
Yes.
And so even in heaven, when people, Jesus says, some will be over many cities, that is a responsibility. It is amazing that the God of the universe would choose me to do it.
Yes.
But it comes with responsibilities to and responsibility for, not necessarily that I get blessings that other people don't get, except there is a blessing of getting to bless people with God.
Yes. And I think in proper societies, proper family structures, where the people take that responsibility seriously, I think certainly we're supposed to hold leaders to account, especially when there's evidence of corruption or someone abusing their power, things like that. But in proper family structures, that is why people who have the responsibility of leadership, God does talk about honoring those people. It's not often that gets abused. Often it does, where there are people who say, well, I'm the parent or I'm the this, and so you have to, and they use that to abuse their power.
They take privilege.
They take the privilege from. But the way it should work, and so I talk to my younger daughters about this all the time. I said, if you could hear the conversations I have with your older sister when we're going to let her be in charge while we're going off and doing something or that, I said, she's always talking to me of, well, I think we should do this because I know that's what my little sister likes. And I know she'll like, and that'll help her feel better about it. But the little sisters see it as, you're just making all the decisions and you're trying to be in charge of it. And I say to them all the time, I said, if you could see, she sees it as a responsibility. Yes, she is the one who gets to choose, but because she's the one who hopefully has the maturity to look and see, this isn't about me using it, as Philippians would say, to her own advantage, but to look out to the interest of others and say, I'm the one who has the position to look and see what's best for everyone in this situation.
Right.
That's what that's what good parents do. That's what good leaders do. And that's the example of Christ-like leadership is, as Jesus would say, don't lord it over the people, as he says, as the rulers of the Gentiles do, but really use it to serve people, to see it as my elevated position of leadership actually is actually a challenge for me to become a better servant.
Now, I want to add again, because I know we've talked about this longer than we thought we would, that whatever honor comes in heaven, which again, I could point to script, and it's all figurative, so it's hard to say.
That's right.
For sure. You know, God places crowns on people's heads in the book of Revelation, at which point they immediately toss them back at his feet.
Right.
Because whatever God gives to you in ways of honor, because of where you are, you're in his presence, you realize, oh, this does not belong to me. You receive all honor and all glory and all. So anything that would come as a reward, you will realize that too was grace. And it won't be used in a way that I walk around with my crown and go, oh, look at your tiara.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not that way, because everybody whatever anybody gets, they will put back at his feet knowing it belonged to him.
Yes. That's good.
Wonderful answers.
Yes. Jason was so supportive.
And I can say that because, you know, it's as good as anything else.
It is.
That's right.
Remember the very first thing I said. Everything we or anyone else says,
That's right.
it's speculation.
But that's why they asked us.
That's right.
That's right.
So, here's my teaser for next week.
All right.
Ready for this?
Tease us.
Have you ever heard of the phrase women's intuition?
I have.
Somebody wants us to talk about that.
They want us to talk about women's intuition?
3 dudes.
Oh, there we go. Three dudes in a women's intuition.
That will be a entertaining episode, I'm sure.
It will.
And so come back next week and you get to hear it.
Yeah.
And we will see if it's entertaining.
Yeah.
See you then.